So, hi, Ella. How are you doing?
I'm doing so very well this morning. Claire, how are you doing?
Yeah, so Ella's in the States. So it's my kind of dinner time. Ella's mid morning snack time. 11's
Hmm.
is, as we say in the UK. And she's looking so glowing and gorgeous. So you're probably going to see when I show some clips of this how great she looks. I was like, wow, you look so good on Zoom. I felt like I was not so prepared. Um, Everybody, this is Ella Parlor. She is a marketing powerhouse, podcaster, speaker, real estate investor, and an author of her book. And she's written a book recently, High Tolerance, which sounds amazing. So wow, I mean, a woman of many talents. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. I'm so excited to talk with you, learn more
I
about
am.
you, share a little bit about my story.
I always start the podcast with just getting a nice feel of you and telling me a bit about you, your career journey, um, and then we dig in. We dig in with more questions. But tell everyone that's listening just a little bit about you, Ella, and your career journey so far.
Yes, I love the story of my career. It's almost like a love story, and that's why I ended up writing a book about it because the three questions, it answers the three questions that I get often from people. The first two being, well, how did you get that job? And the second is like, what do you do? What do you do? So I'm from corporate America. I've worked with global brands, a lot that you've heard of, several from the UK as well. But my specialty is in sales and marketing for alcoholic beverage brands. So I've worked with brands like Tanqueray Gin, Beef Eaters, Crown Royal, you might have heard of Johnny Walker, Buchanan's, Glenlivet. I've worked with several brands around the world. Jameson whiskey, probably my favorite. And my career started with Red Bull many years ago before the energy drink sector was well known as a category. So
Yeah,
that really started this niche career within the beverage space, but specifically within sports. So I've worked with, I hope nobody hates me for saying this, I've worked with Manchester United, and several sports brands around the
cool.
world, the very large sports brands, especially in North America. And so I it's a very niche space that I'm in, and I'm specifically in sales and marketing. So I now have a agency that I started called EP Consulting, where I'm consulting for brands. I'm helping brands that either want to enter the North American market from a distribution standpoint, but I'm also empowering leaders to better understand the strategies behind some of the products that they're creating and just making sure that we're getting their products into more hands. So that could look like anything from a celebrity sponsorship to a sports sponsorship to how we merchandise the store, the retail store, to make the product shine on the shelf. That could mean looking at the labels, changing the labels, all these little details that go into marketing. And I
Yeah,
think that marketing is such a buzzword. Everybody talks about marketing this, marketing that. And I somehow got blessed that I was able to build a career before it was such a buzzword that I know a lot of the principles and tactics that it take to drive sales and revenue. So the campaigns that I've produced and worked on and executed have yielded over $1 billion in sales for global brands around the world. And ultimately, what I'm hoping to do is take a lot of my experiences and be able to empower other business leaders, other female leaders, to creating the career or business that they desire using a lot of the tactics that I've gleaned from my career. So it's been wonderful. Feel very blessed. Starting your own business is, as you know, is a different
yeah,
beast.
yeah, 100%. It's one of those things that linking it with confidence, the irony that I was setting up a confidence coaching business, yet setting a business up is the most challenging thing for your confidence in the sense of, imposter syndrome, the perfectionism that comes with it, not wanting to like put a foot wrong, um, the rejections that happen when you're starting a business, when you expect something to do well and it doesn't do so well, and all of those things. So I'm so glad that my sort of self esteem was in such a healthy place that I wasn't really getting I was definitely getting a sense of purpose and fulfillment with my business, but not a sense of validation. And I think that's where I could keep going with it and not get sort of really knocked down because it can chip away at you, right? Launching a business.
Yes. And I would say what I try to tell my clients when I'm working with them, because my focus now in this phase of life is I don't just want to sell products. I already know I can sell products. I can sell products all day long, and it's a great, easier way to make money, but that's not what life is about. I'm at a
Yeah.
point where I really want to support the people behind the product and services. I want to, yes, we can come up with business tactics that make you better, but let's also talk about you as the person. And confidence building is a big part of that, especially for business leaders. And what I say over and over again is confidence isn't something that comes from within, it comes from action. Once you've taken action, you then have the confidence to do it again. Even if you failed, you already have done it once and you know, oh, the failure didn't kill me. So now I have the confidence to try it again and I'm going to do it better the second time. And
Yeah.
I think that that's one of the misconceptions that we have, especially for someone like myself, which what I've been told profusely is I come across extremely confident. Well, that's because I'm extremely experienced, for better or worse. It's not always a good thing to be very experienced, by the way, because with a lot of experience comes a lot of rejection, a lot of pain, a lot of overcoming obstacles. But because, for a myriad of reasons we may touch upon today, I am very experienced for my age, that gets confused with, oh, I wake up confident. No, I wake up every day experienced, and what you're seeing is my experience, and that confidence is coming from previous action taken, not from a personality type.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I fully agree. Like when I'm teaching kind of self-confidence sessions, I always say that, a huge part of confidence it is just in building competency. Like you have to do the thing. You have to do it before you're ready to build that confidence. Nobody starts something and goes, "Oh yeah, do you know what? I'm so confident in this." Like nobody. Like it's a building a skill. It's trying it. It's like you said, it's failing and getting back up again. And then, like you said, we've tried it once and it's just a competency thing. As you build the competency the confidence will come, but if you sit around waiting to feel ready or confident before you start, you'll be there forever, mate. Like you're going to age 20 years because you're still not going to do it. It's one of those things. And I just think it's hard for people to get their head around because they look at women like you and I who, like I said, come across very confident, but we've been on our journey. We didn't get born this way. We went through trials and we went through difficulties and we started before we were ready. And that just builds that level. And my confidence journey probably started, I mean, I'd say really my authentic confident journey started in my late sort of 20s. But even in the last 3 years of doing this business, like I have got through so many limiting beliefs just by doing this business. Like I used to hate presenting. I would never stand up and present in work. I swerved sort of any sort of promotions where I'd need to present. I was like, no, don't want to do that. I had all these blocks around it. And it was really weird because I kind of knew I'd be good at it, but I just had so much fear and like awkwardness around it. And I think that doing this sort of business, like I've had to the point that I now in the day job that I have, aside from this business, run loads of mental health training that I lead on. I can have 1,000 people on those calls. If you'd said to me 5 years ago I'd be doing that, I'd have been like, absolutely no way. So it's interesting by starting before I was ready, putting in those building blocks, doing small things, one-to-one coaching, building that confidence, realizing I was good at it. I could then do the big things, the big scary things. And those people think I'm super confident. They think like I'm nervous, but you just got to kind of sometimes fake it till you make it, right? You naturally just relax as it goes on. And then you're like, oh, that was amazing. I did that. I want to hear more about your book because is it a career based story or do you talk all about your childhood? Do you talk about relationships? Like, I want to hear all about it.
So high tolerance, the title is a spin on two things. So as I mentioned, I've built a career in alcoholic beverage marketing. And so high tolerance meaning you can drink a lot, which by the way, I can. But it's also about having a high tolerance for behaviors, other mindsets, a high tolerance for physical pain. And so the book is my journey from the lens of my career. So I do touch upon my childhood within the context of skills building that I got in my early childhood days in relation to my career. So I don't dive deeply into my parents or my background or our economic status, things like that. But I do talk about everything within the context of my career. What is my purpose? What are my skill sets? Where did I start? It is a business memoir. And I did not want the book to open this way, but the editors, my publisher insisted, and I lost that argument. But the book was in order, right? So it starts with the history of alcohol in the United States specifically, which has a very complicated history with alcohol and laws. And then I go into my childhood and then my career and then where I am at present day at the time of the book. So not present day today, but
Yeah.
present day a few years ago. And in the book, I have a very painful breakup that I kind of sandwiched in there. And the breakup, again, everything's within the context of my career. So I talk about this painful juxtaposition of celebrating the fact that I developed a new gin brand. So part of my job is developing brands so they can get purchased by bigger companies. That's where I've been able to make more of my money in recent years. And so I developed this gin brand, and we had an advertising campaign that was really successful. And I'm patting myself on the back, and I feel really good. And then I'm encountering an alcoholic at home who I really want to stop drinking alcohol. And so I talk
Mm.
about that duality of being in love with a man who's in love with alcohol and loving my career, but loving his love of hating his love of alcohol. And I talk
Yeah.
about that. And the editors opened with that.
Of
They were
course.
like, we're gonna put that breakup right in the front of this book. And I'm like, what? This is supposed to be a business book. The breakup was just to prove a point and convey a point and personalize, a lot of the theories that I put out, the marketing strategies that I put out there, and they moved it right to the front.
That
Um,
doesn't surprise me though, because it's what people are interested in. Like that conflict, like I want to go read that immediately. Do you know what I mean? Like I also relate to that. My dad's a recovered alcoholic. I grew up in home with that sort of stuff going on. And I think that I've dated people that, have drank and it can be a conflict, right? You can have an experience of something. And like you said, for you and I have lots of happy memories linked to my own boozy nights out in my 20s and stuff. But it conflicts when maybe I'm dating and they're a heavy drinker, and then that kind of makes me uncomfortable because of my history. So this stuff's interesting. Like it is. I could see why they use it, but then I can also see the discomfort in that. 'Cause you're like, I want to talk about my career.
yeah, I think where the book resonates and one of the reasons why so I think the surprising part for me, at the risk of alienating your audience, is that a lot of people who read it wanted to give it to their younger daughters. Younger meaning like 12, 13, 14-year olds. That was shocking for me because the nature of the book has the cover is a photo with me holding a martini. So it was in no way marketed for anyone under the age of 21. It was specifically a book marketed for legal drinking age. And in America, that's 21 years old. So when people started reaching out saying, I'm giving this book to my daughter because I want her to learn from a woman in business who built her career from the quote bottom, I was like, oh, and it's not a vulgar book, but because of the nature of the quote alcohol, I just
Yeah.
really thought of it as an adult book. But people really have wanted their daughters, college age, high school age daughters to get some empowerment from it, and that was really surprising. My intention in writing this book, quite frankly, was because as I looked on the market for books about alcohol, I noticed a few trends and I didn't like it. So I wanted to reverse this. One, none of them are written from inside the industry. These are all people who don't really know about the industry outside of the fact that they drink alcohol themselves. And just because you consume a product, we know this, right? Like even with your coaching business,
Hmm.
just because someone is using your services or product doesn't mean that they understand the business behind it.
Yeah.
And with alcohol, that becomes even more convoluted when you look at the numbers and the business and the people whose pockets are getting lined, mine included, with this business, right? But we're painted in the industry as being some evil people in these books. They talk about us like we are evil and want detriment in the world, and that's not true. I work with good people. I've worked with
Mm.
really good people. I've worked with not so good people, but I've also worked with good people. And I wanted to offer a fresh perspective of, okay, I'm not here to point the finger and call anyone an alcoholic. I'm here to talk about the truth of the alcohol industry from the inside and start a new conversation about what alcohol culture is, because
Mm.
I do have some major concerns about the trajectory. Things that I've seen in my career, things that we're doing today, again, specifically in America, but also in Africa and Asia, were impossible 10 years ago. That frightens me. The amount
Mm.
that we're drinking, the rates at which we're drinking post pandemic are alarming. And I wanted to sound the alarm a bit. And I think that that's where the appeal is. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to point the finger and call anyone an alcoholic. I'm here to instigate a conversation because everything else on the market is pointing the finger saying, you're a drunk, you need to get sober.
It's really, really interesting because like Britain is super famous for drunks abroad. Like they're known in Europe for just like English people. Well, I don't think it's just English, it's British, Scottish, Welsh, going abroad, getting hammered, embarrassing themselves. And we're all like a bit embarrassed about it. But like in the UK, that drinking culture has been unhealthy for decades. You know, first of all, your drinking age is a lot higher than ours. Ours is 18. We were all drinking from 15. And I mean, getting drunk. Um, it was regular in like secondary school for people to be sitting on benches every weekend, getting absolutely like hammered, as we say in the UK. I wasn't personally, but I was drinking from 16, and that was completely normal. And we were all going to clubs underage. It's completely different in the States, way more, strict when it comes to ID. I was using my sister's ID. They knew it wasn't me. They were letting us in. It's so crazy because I feel in the UK that it's changed loads. So the younger generation since the pandemic don't seem to be drinking, not like we did. It seems like partying and stuff isn't really happening, not in the same way. And friends of mine that have got daughters that are sort of 16, they're like, no, they go to the gym to socialize. And I'm like, what? What is this? You know, we had a decade of partying. That was just the complete norm. So I'm interested that it's, yeah, in America, it's sort of the drinking's gone up since the pandemic. And it may be the same case in the UK for like the older generation, but the younger generation doesn't seem to be happening.
I don't have visibility to UK numbers right now. I wish I did because I would pull them out for you.
Yeah.
My expertise is narrowed. I understand the global market, but my expertise is narrowed to North America specifically. But what I will say about Gen Z is that there's this narrative that they drink less. And while that's somewhat true, that is somewhat true, I think there's a misconception in the amount of drinking. So,
Right.
from a volume perspective, just because you feel like you're drinking less because you're drinking a seltzer in a can instead of pouring a bottle of whiskey in a glass does not mean that you're drinking less alcohol. It's the same
Yeah.
sensation with wine, right? You'll have people who go through a bottle of wine and they feel like it's healthier and fine because it's made from grapes. And no, a glass of wine and a shot of tequila are the same amount of alcohol. And if you're taking 4 shots of tequila at home by yourself, it's the same as drinking a bottle of wine by yourself. A bottle of wine has four
Yeah.
glasses.
Yeah.
So I think that this is where there's a little bit of a misconception. And that's where I say, let's take it to the data. What does the data say? Globally, we are drinking more than ever on a global
Right.
scale. So, not making it specific to the UK,
But
but
overall,
we are drinking more. And a big part of that is because of the African market, which I have a lot of concerns about because we, both in America and the UK, we've had alcohol in our markets for centuries now, that we had some education with it, right? We knew that alcohol can cause XYZ. We're now going into markets where they don't have any education about
mm,
alcohol and we're just pouring it like gasoline on a flame to a
Yeah.
group of people who have no education, that don't understand that it could be addictive, that don't understand that the higher rates of death, rape, crime that come with this alcohol. And we're pouring it into Africa, we're pouring it into the Middle East. So that's concerning. I don't have a lot of control on that, but that's where we're seeing a big surge in numbers. We're also seeing post 2020 in America that women, middle aged women, are succumbing, dying to alcohol related diseases at
Mm,
alarming rates. So, just to your point, it might not be Gen Z right now.
mm,
They are turning to cannabis alternatives, they're turning to mushroom alternatives. I don't know that that's necessarily, quote, better.
yeah.
But what I do want to do is start having conversations, like instigating conversations to say, why do we need to escape? What are we escaping?
Yeah.
Can we reel it in a little bit? And can we also just and also enjoy it? My intention isn't to eradicate alcohol. It's just to instigate new conversations where we're not demonizing other people.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think you can have a completely healthy relationship with it. And I think that it's all about just having boundaries around it that are comfortable for yourself. And I think because of my history, there's certain rules I have. I don't often drink at home, unless I have people over for dinner and stuff. But I'm not someone that would sit and drink on my own just because of my history. It kind of triggers me, and I don't really want that. But then I will be a hypocrite and go and have a cocktail in a bar. Which, what's the difference? But it's my own, it's like my own lens. So my own history has created a lens that I'm comfortable drinking in certain places, but I'm not in others. And yeah, I'm the same. I think it's all about having a relationship that works for you with it without it being excessive. Um, so I would love to hear about, I always ask my guests about their confidence, pivotal life moments. People usually give me one that's like a good one, and then one that, to be honest, they usually are both end up being good, whether they're negative or not, because they've spun you to a different place that's worked for your confidence. But one that was more of a negative one at the time that was pivotal with your confidence, and then one's more positive. I would love to hear yours, Ella, because I think they're going to be good.
Oh gosh. Well, we talked earlier about confidence building and experience and so forth, and I only had this epiphany recently because a question was asked to me, and I really had to think because a little dissimilar to you, I'm always the one doing the presentations. I have no problem, even if I don't technically work for the company and I'm just acting as a third party extension. Like if you had some type of seminar and you didn't want to speak yourself, I could speak to your brand like very well if I have the deck and all of that. That is definitely my forte. I love speaking, I love corporate trainings, all of that, those types of things. And I love storytelling. And so somebody asked me, when was your first public speech? And I'm like diving back, and I remember I was 9 years old. I had entered an essay contest, which was ironically because of the career I ended up in, about it was Red Ribbon Week, which is this time where we celebrate not using drugs or alcohol as children, right? So it's this whole campaign across schools in America that prevent that. So I did a Red Ribbon Week. I wrote a Red Ribbon Week essay. I won. And a part of my quote prize in this essay writing contest was reading my essay to the entire school of 600 students. And so that was my first public speaking moment. And it sparked something in me that I didn't know that I had. One, my love
Mm.
of writing, but then two, a love of speaking. And I think that from there, that's where I was very comfortable raising my hand and volunteering to present or what it might be, right? All and through my college years. Um, so I think that was a pivotal moment that I didn't even recognize until recently that really sparked this idea of storytelling, which as marketers is so important. How we tell our stories, our brands, our products is so important to connecting with our consumers and target audience. So I think that that was a big one for me. As far as a negative, I'm trying to go through my many, many mistakes because I've made a lot in my career. I've made some big ones. I'm trying to think of what would be the most from a
They don't have to
confident.
be career related, by the way. They can just be life related, like your confidence, a pivotal moment in life that's just happened that kind of had an impact in one way or the other.
Well, I will say one of the worst things that I don't want to say happened to me, but one of the worst things that I experienced, which was very isolating because to this day, I've maybe met one other woman who's had this happen to her. I was very madly in love with a man, and he asked me to marry him, and I was the happiest I'd ever been in my entire life. I would go to bed feeling bad for everybody who wasn't me because I was living the dream life I'd always wanted. I had a place by the beach, I had a great job, I had an amazing man who I loved. He was handsome and beautiful and strong and fun and he had an 8-pack. He was sexy, he was wealthy, he loved me. Life was amazing.
This sounds amazing.
I couldn't believe it. And I was in my mid 20s and I just thought this is the dream. And then it turns out the person who I thought he wasn't.
Oh,
And
God.
we, I had to go to my family 2 months before the wedding. Now, if you've ever planned a wedding, you know that 2 months, everything's done. The
Yeah.
dress is purchased, the venue is purchased, the furniture is purchased, the
People have booked their
catering.
flights.
Everybody had booked flights. He was from another country, so his family had booked their flights from Europe and their hotel rooms, and that's actually how it got out that our wedding was canceled because so I had to send an email. I sent an email because I was devastated. I was heartbroken. I couldn't believe that this was my life. I'm Googling, there are all these websites dedicated to new brides, like how to plan your wedding and how to plan a bachelor party. Do you know that at the time, and I'm sure to this day, there is nothing to tell you how to cancel a wedding?
Yeah.
Nothing to tell you how to cancel a wedding. And the humiliation that goes with, is there any way I could get a refund on that because this isn't happening anymore? It was awful.
Mm, it sounds
And
horrific.
the idea of telling everyone I love, and then the idea of having to, which as etiquette would have it, you are to reach out to everybody who sent gifts and ask them if they want the gift back. That's what etiquette says. So if someone gives you money, if someone gives you furniture, we got very nice gifts from our generous friends and family, leading up to the wedding, and I had to reach out to everyone as etiquette would have it to
Oh
say, would you
gosh.
like it back? It was just so isolating and awful. And there was nobody who
Oh,
could say, I've been through this and you're going to get through it. And
I
it's
can
just,
relate to I didn't have to cancel a wedding, but I probably should have. I can relate to being with someone and feeling so lucky and being really in love, and then realizing that that person is absolutely not what you thought. And I was with him for well over a decade. So I absolutely relate to the shock of and the humiliation that comes with that. Because even though it's not your fault or you've been authentic, you've shown up to this as yourself, I feel like it brings this level of shame. Like, how did I not see it? Well, it did for me. And I think that yeah, that period of my life, I've talked about it a little bit on this podcast, but it's a blur. It was such a shock that I just dissociated from it because it was like an out of body experience, because that's what we do, right? We go into survival mode when something is so painful and so shocking. You go into that dissociated state and you do what you have to do to survive. And I can honestly say for that a year or two, I don't have very clear memories of any of it.
oh, I love,
But the feelings are still quite visceral. Like if I see something on TV, I mean, it's definitely got way better, I'd say, in the last 5 years. But if I see something on TV that triggers that, like, yeah, it can feel visceral because it's like it's a trauma. Like being so deceived or betrayed or whatever it is, whatever's happened that's linked to that person that's been a shock. Um, that stays in you, and it's one of those things you just have to work through in time. But I do relate to that. But yeah, I can imagine how much more horrific that would be to then, because you're dealing with two things. You're dealing with, like, well, three: the shock of finding out something really crazy that you didn't expect, so you're blindsided, you're heartbroken, and then you're having to deal with the humiliation of having to reach out to individuals to ask people if they want their gifts back. Like, oh my goodness, that sounds awful.
it was, and that's why I say to this day, I don't really know. Like, there are people who get engaged and then cancel their engagement. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about canceling a full blown wedding, right?
Yeah.
So like, and anytime when I get the opportunity and it's appropriate, there's a bride because it was day 72, so 72 days I think until our wedding. Whenever a woman has that 100-day mark, because a lot of women will like post like 100 days till the day, I around day 100, between day 70, I'm like, can you imagine if you had to cancel? If they knew me at the time, not a random woman, but a woman who knew me during that time, I'm like, can you imagine if you had to cancel it right now because you found
Yeah.
out a deal breaker? That's what I
How
did. I mean, it's unless you're in that situation and you remember what it feels like at day 70 before your wedding day, a true wedding. We're not talking elopement, we're talking like an actual proper wedding. It was awful, but I will also add, because you touched upon this, I call it the blacking out. So for people who know a little bit about modern American history, this occurred in 2015. So our wedding was set for fall of 2015 and the breakup happened in fall of 2015, and I blacked out. And I always say, just like you said, like where the memories, anything that came out in 2016, like a movie, like there'll be a movie that people will talk about to this day, like you said, a movie, a song, something, and people will say, oh, how do you not know that? And I'm like, did it happen in 2016? Did this
that
big, because that's the year I blacked out. But I always say I blacked out, woke up.
same. This is crazy because same. I'm the same, like really blurry around like movies that came out, songs that came out. I was so in such a bad way that I didn't even listen to music for about 6 months. And I love music. I listen to it all day, every day. I didn't even listen to music because I didn't want to listen to anything new around that point in time because then it would always be remind me of that period of time. And I was like, so I don't want to scar it by that. But I didn't want to listen to anything old because it would remind me of this person who I've been with for over 10 years. So I totally get it. There's like that whole year where you're like, no, I wasn't really functioning during that period of time. I'm sorry.
Well, I always say, like, I blacked out, woke up, and Trump was our president.
Oh
That's what
God.
happened. That's what
Shocker.
happened. That's what happened. I was like, oh, this is happening. I went on my honeymoon alone, by the way. Also, another thing that a lot of women don't do.
This is so
Because
Sex in the City when Carrie goes and takes all her friends, when the whole big thing happens. That scene breaks me when he doesn't turn up.
yeah, I mean, and I thought it would be a good idea to watch that movie when I was going through this, and no, no, not the best
No.
idea because it's it's I remember watching that scene. I hadn't even had my first relationship when that movie had come out. I was a late bloomer. And when that movie came out and I watched that scene and she's not wearing any makeup and she looks at herself in the mirror, I remember just going, wow, that seems painful. Like, I can understand the pain and I've never been through that kind of breakup pain because I'd never had a relationship. Fast forwarding 10 years later, when I'm watching it to try to heal what I'm going through and feel, it was the isolation of it,
Mm,
this idea that like I'm going through something that nobody else has. That's not, why me? It's not fair. And I've had people say like, well, divorce is this and that. The thing about a divorce where I'll push back of like, yes, it's painful and it's not about quantifying the pain, but the difference is the timing. Our breakup happened the week of my bridal shower. So I call my maid of honor, and I didn't technically have a maid of honor, but she was the one hosting the bridal shower. And if I did a bridal party, she would have been my maid of honor. And I was like, I don't know. It was 2 days before the shower. People had already booked their flights to come out and celebrate me, the bride. And I was like, I can barely stand up. I'm not going to be able to pretend that this is happening. I haven't told anyone it's called off yet. We're kind of figuring it out. But that urgency of having to announce your pain to people, a divorce is not the same. Maybe with your children, but you can take a little bit of time to think and process a little bit, But when you know that people are spending money actively to celebrate something that's no longer happening, there is this pressure.
yeah.
And the maid of honor, she's apologized profusely for this, but her first reaction when I call her hysterical saying, I found this out, I don't know what to do. She was just like, I already ordered decorations. That was like her thought. And then I started crying hysterically because the idea of, oh my God, not only did she buy decorations, people brought bought gifts for this, and just the overwhelm, the hotel rooms, and just knowing all the money and time that goes into celebrating someone's, that
And
pressure is not there when it's a breakup or a divorce. And
no.
it was the piece where I felt so isolated that I didn't have anybody to say, I've been there. We're going to walk you through this. We're going to get
Mhm.
through this together. It was everybody kind of thinking about their loss in it too, the money they lost, the time they like their loss of watching me, and like it's a very strange, weddings are strange anyway, right? You see a lot of narcissism and ego come out,
Yeah.
but then you add this like wasted time and money, and nobody made me feel like they wasted my time and money. I had a beautiful support system, but I didn't have anyone who could take me by the hand and say, I've done this and I'm going to do it with you. And this goes back to your original question about confidence. To do something so painful that nobody
Mhm.
else has done is isolating, and it almost broke me. I didn't want to live anymore after all of that. I really felt like I
Yeah.
would never survive it. My this ex-fiance of mine was a professional athlete. He was well known, so to speak. And that extra attention made everything feel worse. Like every move was being watched, whether it was people out of pity or people out of gossip, whatever it was. I just felt like I was very, the spotlight was on me. As a bride, you feel that anyway. But when you're a bride that's no longer a bride, that. But on the other side, almost 10 years later, nothing can compare to that again. Nothing. I wouldn't even
Yeah.
allow anything to consume my life the way that I allowed this wedding, this relationship, the breakup to consume me. I won't even give anything that power again. And so, having survived that again with a beautiful support, but ultimately on my own, I know that I can survive anything else because I handled it with pain, but with grace. I
Yeah.
didn't handle it perfectly, but I reread the letter that I sent, the email I sent out to my family and friends after it. I reread it maybe a couple years ago, somewhat recently, because I sent out an email to everyone to let them know that the wedding was canceled, and then I turned off my phone for 24 hours because I didn't want the phone calls, I didn't want the
Yeah.
questions, I didn't want all of that. But I wanted to notify everyone as soon as possible so they would stop spending money on something that wasn't happening. And I reread that email, and it is so beautifully written. And I said, I didn't bury a child. I'm not recovering from cancer. Yes, this is extremely painful, but I will move on. And I don't know how I had the wherewithal to take my pain and minimize it in comparison to real common frustrations and painful moments that we as humans experience. And
Mhm.
I'm really proud of myself that I was able to say I didn't lose a child.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I relate as well to that, being in so much shock and so much pain, but doing it with grace, because that was really important for me too. Like, I'm not going to retaliate. I'm not going to be bitter. I'm not going to be public about this. I'm going to do it with grace. And um, yeah, I feel the same about my situation when I reflect on it. But how did I even do that? Like I was going to work like a few days after that. I was fully functioning, and well, I wasn't, because I obviously was just floating off somewhere else. My brain was somewhere else, but I was physically showing up. And yeah, it was
I
a dark time, and it's similar. Mine was 2014, so it was real close time to you. Yeah, it was like
Yeah.
the worst
Yeah, I
year.
crashed my car twice after it happened. So when you say like functioning, like I wasn't, my brain wasn't working. I crashed my car twice in very silly ways, completely sober in the middle of the day. So for about 3 months I just Ubered everywhere because I couldn't even handle the task of driving because of the unsurmountable amount of crying that I was doing. I was crying so hard I couldn't see the road, and I couldn't keep my eyes open in the hysteria of it. And I crashed my car. I crashed my car making a U-turn, um, and into a light pole, and then it went to the shop. Came out of the shop. I had it less than a week, and I crashed it again. And I thought to myself, I think I need to take some stuff off my plate.
Yeah.
Um, and I was very blessed because I'm in the alcohol industry. I had an unlimited Uber account. So I was able, just for anyone wondering who the heck can afford that, because of my job, I was able to, have Uber for 3 months without anybody caring or noticing, and it was just through my expense account. So, I mean, yeah, it was really hard to cope and function, and it was just a really painful time all around for a lot of people involved. I will say I was very public about it, except for the reason why everything ended. I never mentioned that. I always just said he's not who I thought he was. That's it. I never gave, because if I told people what it was, I think it would be worse than they were thinking. I think they all assumed it was an affair of some sort. And I was okay with them assuming an affair versus what it actually was, um, because it was worse than an affair, if you will. Or it was
And
an
it's
affair in its own way.
it's your heartbreak to tell. Like it's nobody's business. It's really interesting how when things like this happen, how so many people can just become like, those people that love the drama. Like suddenly I had loads of new people that like they were kind of acquaintances, but suddenly they wanted to be my best friend and hang out with me. And it was just literally to just hear the latest drama. And there was a lot of drama with not linked to me, but linked to him and what was going on. Um, and it taught me a lot of lessons about that, like people's intentions, who were my authentic friends, who was checking in 6 months later, not just 2 weeks after, because everyone just assumes you're going to get over it, right? Oh, should be fine now. And it's like, no, still having an out of body experience, still not present, still reeling from it, still waking up every day feeling sick every time I remember it. And I think that yeah, those people that stuck around. And I think it similar to you actually, you were saying the lesson of how you've never let yourself kind of allowed somebody to take up that much energy or space in your heart since. Like I I fully agree. I think it taught me a lot of lessons. It actually for me was completely the beginning of my entire self-development journey. So I actually am super grateful for it. Like I'm a very different person and a much better person since. But shit, it was yeah, a rough lesson for that year. So thank you for sharing that because I think that will
Oh,
resonate. Although I'm hoping nobody has had to go through that because that's horrific. I think people can resonate, through those real dark days and those really tough situations we go through, how that can be a pivotal moment. It's negative in such the situation was negative, but it taught you so many lessons and you're a different woman for it and probably a stronger one. So yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. I wanted to know a little bit about little Ella and how she differs from Ella now. Are you quite a similar character? Have you just kind of grown and taken on those character traits, or are your confidence levels completely different? I just think that's quite fascinating to look at.
I find it really fascinating as well, just because I am myself. So I find it fascinating from that standpoint. It's really weird to me to talk about little Ella, and I do reference her sometimes, but the truth is, I didn't change my name to Ella until I was 14. So there was no little Ella. And that's weird, like to even think about if that's hard for anyone to understand. Maybe if they took on a maiden name, but most people do not change their names. Um, it's interesting changing your name and with some yeah, it's very interesting to like we could do a whole podcast on names and
Yeah.
nomenology, but I made the decision to change my name at 14 because I found out that my name that my family still to this day calls me, Mikey, I love it. I didn't know that was a boy's name. So growing up, I thought Mikey, similar to a lot of other names that end in EY, was a female name like Nikki or Jamie well, those are both gender neutral, but I really thought Mikey was a girl's name. And then there was a pivotal moment that I was humiliated to discover that not only was my name a boy's name, but it was also everybody else knew it but me. So I was like humiliated in this classroom moment where everybody's like, "You didn't know?" And I'm like, "No, I'm 12 years old. I did not know that my name was a boy's name. I thought it was gender neutral." I thought, and nowadays, right, like everyone names boys, girls, all that, but we're talking the 90s here. So
Yeah, very different. Very different.
very different. And I felt just so deceived and upset and questioning my identity. Um, and I decided to change my name to Ella because that was the name of a main character in a book we were reading at the time called Just Ella. It's like a prequel to Cinderella, whose name, by the way, if anyone doesn't know, Princess Cinderella's name was Ella. She was called Cinderella because of the ashes on her face from dusting her family's house. So I think when I think about the time that I changed my name, at 14, I made a decision that really changed the trajectory of my life. And anytime I tell someone my name is Mikey, they're like, "You're not Mikey, you're Ella." And I'm like, "Yeah." Or if someone compliments my name, like, "Oh, I love the name Ella." I'm like, "Thank you. I chose it myself." But I'm very proud of that name change because even at 14, I was planning and thinking and deciding who I wanted to be up and how I was going to show up in the world. And I think that was the first time in my life where I defied my parents by picking a new name, which did not go over well. If you're a parent, you can imagine how you might feel if your child changed their name. But like I said, most people do not change their names. And so it was a whole thing. And I think that little Ella, little Mikey, right? That's more accurate. Little Mikey, I was born this I'm the same person. I came out of the womb this audacious, this strategic. uh, I had an organized planner by 9 years old. I was the person who was putting together the talent shows. I've been writing since I was 7. I had a diary that I kept, started in 1997 when I was 7. And I used that to write my book. And that's how I was able to recall a lot of memories from my childhood. I am in a very interesting way the exact same person. I've never had someone say to me, "Wow, you've really changed." And I don't know if that's a great thing or not. I'm
I
coming
think
more to
it is. I
myself.
think it is. I think it, for me, the fact that you picked a name that suited you better, right, in itself kind of shows me like, as I feel like you do that now, you'd be like, no, that's not me. I'm doing this. So I feel like I love that you were authentically you from a really from birth, and you were just like, this is who I am. I love the fact that you had a little organizer and that you were organizing all the talent shows and you were that person, and that the career path that you've gone into and everything. And that we were chatting before the call about how Ella's the most organized podcast guest I've ever had. And I was saying to her, like, oh my God, amazing. I've been blown away by it. I love that about you, and that that's just carried on. Because I think I'm still very much me too, but I feel like potentially when I was younger, I was showing up as this, but I wasn't authentically it yet. I was kind of faking the confidence. I was still very chatty and talkative and curious. Like that curiosity has always been with me. I'm so curious about people and stories. But I feel like yeah, I feel like now I am truly that. I'm not faking it till I make it like I've made it, and that's who I am now. And I did the work to get here. So yeah, I love that answer because I think yeah, it's quite rare because people do they tend to change loads in adulthood. So I love the fact that you've just stayed the same, you've just grown.
Well, and even I will add, because advertising and marketing is my strong point, I would look at commercials and I would either A, critique them. I'm talking as a little kid. I'd say, "Mom, I thought of a new commercial for this restaurant. They need to do one where they're doing this." I mean, I was ideating commercials. And now I make commercials. So
Yeah, that's great.
I'm just such a believer. I can't take credit for that. I think that I'm just so blessed that I was able to live, as you said, in authenticity of this is who I am. My parents were so hands off, and that's has its pros and cons, but they were hands off in the sense of they really let me be me. They really just were like, "All right, if you want to make that mistake, you go for it." And that meant that they were a little bit more aloof and not always involved and not always there and not always, sometimes they were absent. And that has its own pain, if you will, that comes with it. But they always empowered me to do what my heart desired. And what a
Yeah,
gift. What a
that is. I
gift.
was about to say what a gift because that's rare. A lot of the women I coach, they are lost and unfulfilled and stuck in their 30s and 40s because they didn't have that gift, because they were desperately trying to please, because they were going to schools and universities and picking degrees that their parents wanted them to do. They picked careers their parents wanted them, and they didn't want to do it. They don't want to do it now. They're like, who am I? Most of the question I get often is, I don't know who I am. Whereas I totally understand there's a flip side to that. And that there's things that have negatively impacted you in that sense. But the positive is it is such a gift to be allowed the space to work out who you are and to just sit back and go, yeah, you go for it. Like that is a gift. And it's something that I see the flip side of that, the results of that when that hasn't been there, and it has a huge impact. So it's kind of amazing that there was that space, but I also understand, the flip side of that. I always end the podcast on asking the question about a golden nugget of advice that you would give to women that are on a confidence journey that you may have learned from others, or you may have learned along the way for your own story. But I always think it's a really nice place to end it, because then people learn something at the end that they can maybe implement into their lives. So what would be your one golden nugget of advice?
It's twofold because I'm always long-winded. First and foremost, as we said earlier, confidence does not come just from something that you have. It's not something you have within. It is something that comes as a result from taking action. And if you're unsure what action to take, I would implore you to find an amazing coach like Claire, or a consultant such as myself. But even if it's not either of us, finding an expert who can help you in taking the actions needed to build that confidence. We as women are not investing in ourselves in the way that we need to. We invest in our skin and our hair and our nails and our looks.
So true.
But what good is looking beautiful like a Victoria's Secret model when you don't have the confidence to walk the runway, right?
Yeah.
And so that confidence building does not come from something that you can just manifest and meditate into your life. It's going to come from taking action. If you're unsure what action to take, then that's where you really should invest in an expert who can walk you through the way.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And that's so, so true that, you can spend all the money in the world investing in your looks. But at the end of the day, if you don't really know who you are, or you don't really like who you are, or you don't really like what you're doing, or you're lost, who cares if you look great? Like you're not going to be fulfilled and have that authentic happiness, which is what I think everyone truly wants. So I just want to say a massive thank you. This has been one of my favorite podcasts so far. I've loved this conversation.
Oh, you're wonderful. You're so easy to talk to. You're such a great navigator. It's nice being on this side of the microphone.
Yeah, it's been so lovely to chat to you. And I say thanks so much, Ella. And for anyone listening, I will be tagging Ella's website, her Instagram, her TikTok. She's like me. She's social media everywhere. We're covering all areas. I'll be tagging all of everything to do with her. So if you want to read more about her, you want to buy her book, you want to listen to her podcast. Your podcast is called, remind me what it's called so people can search for it.
Eavesdrop with Ella. And
Love
it's about success, the various metrics of success for individuals. Because what you'll find sometimes is as you build a financial success, you realize that you're emotionally drained or spiritually bankrupt. And so really talking about the myriad ways to build success.
Amazing. So I'll also tag her podcast. So thanks so much, Ella. And for my listeners, I'd love to hear your feedback, your favorite bit of the conversation, anything that really resonated with you. Feel free to give feedback to me and Ella in our DMs. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening in to Eavesdrop with Ella. If today's episode inspired you, please subscribe, rate, or review Eavesdrop with Ella on your favorite podcast platform. While you're at it, you should also send this episode to a friend so we can connect with more eavesdroppers just like you. If you'd like to be a guest, you can visit ellaparlor.com to learn more. Until next time, this is Ella Parlor reminding you to stay resilient, stay abundant, and above all, stay balanced. Thank you for eavesdropping, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Eavesdrop with Ella, a production of EP Consulting. Some of the products and services mentioned are paid promotions, and any advice should be confirmed with a qualified professional. Opinions and ideas are for entertainment purposes only and belong to EP Consulting. All rights reserved.